Welcome to the deep dive. I'm so thrilled you're joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
So for this deep dive, we are pulling from this really revealing stack of notes and service details surrounding a practice called navigating life transitions.
Right, the coping and healing counseling services.
Exactly. Coping and healing counseling services. And our mission today is to really explore that razor-thin line between everyday life stress and a clinical condition.
Which is a much thinner line than people think.
It really is. And we're also going to examine how modern telehealth is radically removing the friction from getting help for that stress.
Yeah, that's the really exciting part.
Okay, let's unpack this because usually when we talk about a physical injury, there's this expectation of absolute precision.
Totally, it's like engineering.
Exactly. Like you break your arm, the x-ray shows that jagged white line, and the doctor just points at the screen. It says, well, there it is.
It's binary. It's broken or it's not broken. It's a very clean diagnostic reality.
We like things to be visible, right? To be categorized.
Of course we do.
But then you step into the world of major life transitions
Yeah.
And mental health, and suddenly that x-ray machine is just utterly useless.
Yeah, the landscape gets incredibly murky.
Right. And we all experience major life changes. But today, we're looking at what happens when those changes just completely overwhelm our system and why you actually don't have to weather those massive shifts alone.
I think the best place to start is the clinical threshold.
Okay, lay it out for us.
Because before we can look at the solutions offered by modern counseling, we really need to understand the specific mechanical breakdown occurring in the mind.
Right, the actual problem.
Yeah. So the source material outlines a condition known as adjustment disorder.
Adjustment disorder, okay.
And this develops within 3 months of an identifiable stressor. So a sudden job loss, a divorce, maybe a severe medical diagnosis, a move.
Wait, I want to pause on that 3-month window.
Yeah.
Why 3 months? Like, what is happening neurologically during that specific time frame that turns a tough life event into an actual clinical disorder?
Well, it really comes down to how our brain's threat detection system operates.
Okay.
When a massive life change hits, your amygdala, the alarm bell of the brain, it floods your system with cortisol and adrenaline.
Right, the fight or flight response.
Exactly. And evolutionarily, this is supposed to be a short-term state, right? To help you survive an immediate physical threat.
Like running from a tiger.
Exactly. But with modern stressors, like a grueling divorce or financial ruin, the threat doesn't just disappear when you run away.
Because you can't run away from a bank account.
Right. It lingers. So if within 3 months your brain fails to downregulate and reset its baseline, that alarm bell effectively gets stuck in the on position.
Oh, wow. I like to think of it like a car suspension system.
Oh, that's a good analogy.
Yeah, because everyone hits potholes. A sudden cross-country move or an unexpected career shift, those are life's potholes.
Right.
You hit one, you feel the bump, your car rattles a bit, but the shocks absorb the impact and you keep driving. But adjustment disorder is what happens when you hit a pothole so deep that the suspension actually snaps.
Yeah, you can't just steer through it anymore.
Exactly. The car is pulling hard into oncoming traffic, and it's physically impossible to drive straight without a mechanic fixing the axle. The impairment is real.
What's fascinating here is that despite how intense and overwhelming this sounds, our sources note that adjustment disorder is actually the most commonly diagnosed mental health condition in outpatient settings.
Wait, the most common?
It is the most common.
Wow.
And that single fact fundamentally changes the narrative, I think.
How so?
Well, it proves that severe, debilitating reactions to major life changes are a widespread human experience. It's not some rare anomaly.
Right.
It is a known, documented, predictable psychological response to just an overload of stress.
But who gets to decide what is typically expected for a reaction to something like, I don't know, a divorce or a diagnosis? I'm looking at the criteria from the text, and I see a phrase that sounds like highly subjective territory.
Which phrase?
It says the symptoms, the anxiety, the persistent low mood, the social withdrawal, they have to exceed what is, quote, typically expected. Who decides what's typically expected for a reaction to something as devastating as a terminal medical diagnosis in the family?
That's a really valid point. And the answer is a licensed clinician makes that assessment.
Okay, but how?
Well, they base it on functional impairment rather than just subjective emotional grading.
The broken axle.
Exactly. They are trained to evaluate whether the reaction is completely dismantling your ability to function in your daily roles.
So it's not just about being sad.
No, not at all. It is totally normal to grieve a job loss. But if the executive dysfunction is so severe that you cannot physically get out of bed to feed your children, or you stop paying your bills for weeks on end, a clinician can objectively identify that the psychological suspension has fundamentally broken down.
So they are measuring the impairment, not judging the sadness.
That's a perfect way to put it, yes.
Okay, so if the suspension is completely broken down and the clinician confirms the impairment, we have to look at how we fix it.
Right.
And our sources shift heavily here, from the problem to the solutions. And it notes that this specific condition is highly responsive to short-term therapy.
Yes. If we connect this to the bigger picture, brief, focused interventions are incredibly effective here.
So we aren't talking about years of therapy.
No, the defining characteristic of adjustment disorder is that it doesn't necessarily require years of deep dive psychoanalysis.
Okay.
The evidence-based approaches cited in our notes include brief CBT, which is cognitive behavioral therapy, problem-solving therapy, and supportive psychotherapy.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because popular culture has completely warped our idea of what therapy looks like.
Absolutely.
We've been culturally conditioned to think therapy is always someone lying on a leather couch, staring at the ceiling, trying to figure out why they resented their mother when they were 7 years old.
Right, the classic Freudian image.
Yeah. But this sounds more like an emotional urgent care visit.
That's exactly what it is.
So how exactly does something like brief CBT work on a mechanical level to fix this?
Well, CBT intervenes directly in the cascading system failure of your thoughts.
Okay, give me an example.
Let's say you receive a devastating medical diagnosis. Your brain instantly generates a catastrophic thought loop.
Like, my life is over.
Right. My life is over. I will be a burden to everyone. There is no point in trying.
Yeah, that's spiral.
And that thought loop triggers a severe behavioral response, like complete isolation. CBT steps in to physically interrupt that loop. A therapist teaches you how to identify the cognitive distortion in real time and restructure it.
Wow.
It doesn't cure the physical illness, obviously, but it recalibrates the mental framework you're using to process it.
It stops the mental bleeding.
Exactly.
And the text also mentions problem-solving therapy. I imagine that comes into play for the massive logistical nightmares, right? Like a divorce or a sudden job loss, where just the sheer volume of tasks is paralyzing.
Yes, problem-solving therapy is highly pragmatic.
How so?
Well, when you are overwhelmed by a life transition, your executive function basically collapses. You can't even figure out step one.
Right.
So a therapist using this modality acts almost like a neurological project manager.
Oh, I like that, a neurological project manager.
Yeah, they help you break down a massive, insurmountable mountain of stress into microscopic, manageable tasks. The goal is to give people the immediate practical tools to navigate a very specific present-day hurdle.
Okay, so if this condition is so responsive to just a brief short-term intervention, why isn't everyone getting the help they need right away? I mean, if it's the most common outpatient diagnosis, the bottleneck isn't the science.
No, the science is solid.
Right, so the bottleneck has to be logistics. Why are people suffering in silence for 6 months if a short-term intervention could patch the suspension?
Because the traditional healthcare system is structurally designed in a way that introduces massive friction.
Yeah, that makes sense.
When someone experiences a crisis, their executive functioning is at its lowest, like we said.
Right.
So to ask someone in the middle of a panic attack to research clinics, verify their insurance, leave voicemails, and then sit on a wait list for 3 months.
It's impossible.
It is a functional impossibility for many. The friction is just too high, so they simply abandon the search entirely.
We could pull the coping and healing counseling model into the conversation here, or CHC as they were referred to in the sources.
Right, CHC.
Because they are actively dismantling that exact logistical friction. Our notes detail that CHC operates as a 100% telehealth IPA compliant practice, and they serve all 159 counties in Georgia.
This raises an important question regarding healthcare equity. Because mental health resources are typically hyper-concentrated in major urban centers.
Right, like Atlanta.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If you look at the physical infrastructure of healthcare, building a brick-and-mortar psychiatric clinic in a rural town of 3,000 people just isn't economically viable for most providers.
Yeah, the math doesn't work.
So consequently, rural populations are left in a complete healthcare desert.
Which is tragic.
It is. But offering a 100% telehealth model across every single county effectively democratizes access to care.
Wow.
A patient out in a rural farming community now has the exact same immediate access to specialized care as a patient living in downtown Atlanta.
That is huge.
Yeah.
But when we talk about a, quote, HEPA-compliant telehealth practice, the HEPA part sounds like, I don't know, standard medical jargon.
Right.
What does that practically mean for you, the listener, sitting in your living room?
It means military-grade privacy applied to your most vulnerable moments.
Okay, so it's not just FaceTime.
No, it is not just a standard video call. IPA-compliant telehealth requires end-to-end encrypted servers. The sessions are never recorded.
Got it.
The data transmission is secured so that no third party can intercept the audio or video. It essentially turns a corner of your bedroom or your parked car into a legally protected, impenetrable medical vault.
A medical vault. I love that. And within that vault, the speed of access is the crucial variable here.
Absolutely.
The text highlights that CHC offers, quote, same-week telehealth scheduling to provide what they specifically call low-friction access.
Mm-hmm.
So if we walk through a scenario,
Yeah.
say you lose your job on a Tuesday afternoon. By Tuesday night, the panic is cascading.
Right, the alarm bell is stuck on.
Exactly.
What?
Wednesday morning, instead of calling 10 offices and hitting voicemail after voicemail, you go online and request an appointment. And by Friday, you are sitting in that encrypted digital room with a professional learning how to interrupt the catastrophic thought loop.
And that speed prevents the pathology from setting in.
It stops it in its tracks.
Yeah, when you intervene within days using evidence-based approaches like CBT, you stop an adjustment disorder from metastasizing into a chronic, clinical depressive episode.
Huh.
You are treating the emotional fracture before the bone sets in correctly.
That is such a vivid image.
Yeah.
The sources also note that their team consists of 15-plus licensed therapists, and the team is specifically highlighted as being diverse and culturally competent.
Yes.
But I do want to push back on the digital delivery mechanism a bit.
Okay, go for it.
Telehealth is great for speed, obviously, and geographical reach. But does a digital-only model actually cover the real variety of human needs out there? Or is it just a one-size-fits-all pipeline? Are they just running people through a standardized digital worksheet?
The data in our sources directly refutes the idea of a standardized pipeline.
Really? How?
The diversity of the care is found in the credentials of those 15-plus therapists.
Okay.
The textless LCSWs, LPCs, and LMFTs. These are not interchangeable titles, you know. They represent entirely different clinical frameworks.
Let's break those down. Because why does a patient need to care about the difference between those acronyms when they just want help?
Because it determines the lens through which your problem is solved.
Okay, explain that.
Let's take an LMFT. That's a licensed marriage and family therapist.
Right.
They operate on systems theory. So if a family is going through a devastating divorce, an LMFT doesn't just treat one person's sadness.
They treat everyone.
Yeah, they look at the entire household ecosystem and how the behavior of the parents is impacting the teenagers, for example. They treat the whole network.
Okay, and how does that differ from the other two, the LPC and LCSW?
Well, an LPC, a licensed professional counselor, is heavily focused on the individual's internal cognitive framework.
So that's the CBT stuff.
Exactly. They are the ones utilizing modalities like CDT to rewire how you process trauma, anxiety, or grief on a very personal level.
And the LCSW.
An LCSW is a licensed clinical social worker. They look at what's called the person and environment.
Person and environment.
Okay. Yeah, they are highly trained at not only providing clinical psychotherapy, but also connecting patients with practical external community resources to stabilize their actual physical environment.
Ah, that makes perfect sense. So because of that diverse expertise, CHC is able to offer individual therapy, couples therapy, family therapy, and teen therapy for kids ages 13 and up.
Yes, plus life coaching.
Plus life coaching, right?
Yeah.
And their specialties cover a massive anxiety, depression, trauma, and PTSD, grief, relationships, and just general stress.
Mm-hmm.
So the digital format is really just the delivery vehicle.
Exactly.
The clinical care occurring within that digital room is highly specialized to the individual.
You get the express lane access of telehealth, but once you arrive, you are matched with a clinician whose specific training background aligns with your exact life transition.
Okay, I hear that. We can talk about convenience and clinical expertise all day long. But if this costs out of pocket what I pay for rent, this whole model just collapses.
Oh, without a doubt.
The ultimate bottleneck to mental health care is the harsh math of financial access. You can have a same-week appointment available, but if it costs $200 a session, it might as well be a mirage for most working people in Georgia.
Financial anxiety compounding an already severe life transition is actually a primary driver of acute adjustment disorder.
Yeah, that makes sense. It just adds to the fire.
People try to tough it out simply because they literally cannot afford the treatment. But let's look at the financial structure CHC uses.
Okay, what do the notes say?
According to our sources, they are in-network with a massive roster of major commercial plans. They list Aetna, Cigna, Blue Cross Blue Shield, United Healthcare, and Humana.
Wow, that's pretty comprehensive. And for those commercial plans, the copay is listed at just $10 to $40 per session.
Yeah.
That brings the cost of specialized clinical care down to the price of, like, a standard takeout order.
It fundamentally shifts therapy from a luxury expense to an accessible utility.
But the detail that really changes the landscape, in my opinion, is their Medicaid coverage.
Yeah.
They are in-network with Medicaid, and the copay is $0.
That is revolutionary in this space.
Really?
Yeah.
Why is that so rare?
Historically, many private practices just do not accept Medicaid due to lower reimbursement rates and huge administrative hurdles.
Oh, I see.
So this leaves the most economically vulnerable populations with the highest barriers to entry.
Right.
By actively choosing to be in-network with Medicaid and offering a $0 copay, CHC is absorbing that administrative burden to provide actual, tangible healthcare equity.
So what does this all mean when you take a step back and look at the architecture of this entire practice? What they've essentially done is weave a universal safety net for the entire state of Georgia.
That's a great way to summarize it.
It is incredibly profound to think about. If you are listening to this right now, consider how this kind of low-friction access fundamentally changes the game. If you get hit by a massive life pothole and the suspension snaps, you can go to chctherapy.com, or you can email support@chctherapy.com, or just dial 404-832-0102. And you can be sitting in front of a licensed professional from the privacy of your own living room that exact same week for little to no cost.
It is the complete elimination of the traditional waiting room maze.
It really is. It has been such an incredible journey unpacking this today. We started by looking at the harsh reality that overwhelming reactions to life transitions, this adjustment disorder, are not only incredibly common, but they represent a legitimate neurological breakdown of your emotional suspension system.
The counterbalance to that reality is the overwhelming hope found in the treatment mechanics.
Yeah.
By utilizing brief, targeted interventions like cognitive restructuring and problem-solving therapy, clinicians can effectively interrupt the cascading failure of a crisis.
And telehealth models like coping and healing counseling are entirely rewriting the rules of delivery. They are proving that the historical barriers, the months-long wait times, the impossible driving distances for rural communities, the massive out-of-pocket costs, they just don't have to exist anymore.
No, they really don't.
This vital support system is immediately accessible across all 159 counties of Georgia.
Think about the last time you went through a massive life transition. Maybe it was a sudden move, a painful breakup, or a career collapse that just shook your foundation.
Yeah.
If a completely frictionless, affordable, short-term support system had been just a click away, how might the trajectory of that chapter in your life have changed?
Wow.
And looking forward, how does knowing this kind of comprehensive safety net exists change the way you viewed the risks, the moves, and the leaps you might take in your future?
That is such a powerful thought to leave on, because you shouldn't have to navigate the highway of life driving on a broken suspension. If the x-ray of your emotional health is murky, there are highly trained professionals ready to step in, clear the waters, and help you heal right now. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Stay curious, take care of yourselves, and we will catch you next time.